Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlipp. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Boy, oh boy, do we have entirely too much to do today. I have been working like a madman here, having a lot of fun. I got notes for days. I've got, went through a bunch of GM. The entire NFC North GM and head coach interviews. The Packers are the only ones that do not have their head coach there, so there's a lot of that. Player interviews. Everybody's doing one for CBS, one for NBC, so I got two for each. Just different stuff that they were talking about. Abdul Carter, Alfred Collins, Cam Ward, Carson Schweichinger, Jaire Alexander. I mean, just a bunch of these guys. Free agency news, combine news, other news that we definitely have to get to today, some pretty big Packers news. GM Brian Gutekunst had a second interview that I'd like to get through. So I don't know how much of that we got to do, but I do know that the Combine starts today. So all the stupid crap about the Combine that I've been talking about has to get done today. Sort of the Combine primer stuff. From there, we'll kind of get through whatever. But why don't we... Let's go through the newsy news, and then we'll go through the Combine stuff. News shouldn't take a ton of time. So the Bills extended Khalil Shakir. Not super big news, but there you go if you were interested. He got a $15 million per year deal. Doesn't tell us a ton. The only other thing, so there's only two real interesting aspects for our sake, and that is, number one, he's not going to hit the market, and number two, the cost. It's kind of hard to gauge what this means for the wide receiver market because it's such a low number. It's not like top end, so we didn't learn what the top end is. Best we could do is determine, how much above what we kind of expected, but I don't have no idea what, for example, what last year's number for him would have been. Jason Peters, two-time All-Pro tackle. Peters retires after 21 seasons, shifts to front office job with the Seahawks. So it'll be interesting to track his career. That guy's been around forever. What else we got here that's kind of nuts? So everything else is sort of bigger stuff. So there's a little bit of tush-push. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. The Eagles did come out and defend the tush-push, obviously. Nick Sirianni came out, said it's effective, it's safe. They put a ton of work into it. Talked about, I think the most important piece of this is the fact that other people have tried it and failed. I think that's a critical piece of information. He traced the play's evolution back to his time with the Indianapolis Colts, where they utilized quarterback sneaks with Jacoby Brissett. He said it's a play that they've kind of refined over time, so this is not just some little thing that they discovered was an easy little cheat. I mean, this is a complex thing that has been developed over many years. He dismissed safety concerns and the idea of banning the play as sour grapes, emphasized that they haven't had injuries related to the play and believes the data will support its safety. Sirianni attributes the success of the tush push to a combination of factors: the strength and skill of the offensive line, the coaching of fundamentals, and the element of surprise, which that last one's a little iffy. But I tend to agree with all that. Now, there are a couple little interesting things on the other side of that. Number one, and I don't really know the details on this, but I found it interesting. Aaron Nagler is there. He's in Indy right now. He was doing a video. Looks like 97.3 The Game is what the logo says up top here. But he had said that, because I mentioned yesterday, Gutekunst and Murphy pushed this to the league. Then Gutekunst does his press conference and says, essentially, I have no idea. I had nothing to do with it. I had heard after the fact that we had done it. Haven't even really looked into it. I don't really have an opinion on it. Nagler says that Mark Murphy did not submit it to the league, that it was somebody else from within the Packers organization. Now, they go on to kind of speculate some things beyond there, which I'm not going to because I don't really know, or I don't see the connection necessarily. But first of all, I'm just kind of shocked that anybody would have that level of authority to do something like that without the sign-off by Mark Murphy, unless it was Ed Policy. Now, the speculation that I'm not going to, I'll say it, but I won't sign off on it, is that other teams are pushing this to the Green Bay Packers because essentially the Packers don't have an owner, so maybe they don't want to be the face of it or something to that effect. So they're kind of just running this through the Packers who submitted it to the league on their behalf. I don't know. There would have to be some other weird political dynamics going on as far as not wanting to sign off. But at the same time, if there's going to be a vote and you vote on it, we're going to see how you voted, right? So I don't know. It's a very weird thing. Apparently, the Packers submitted a proposed ban of the tush push, and Mark Murphy and Brian Gutekunst were not a part of it and really didn't know anything about it. And I don't know how that happens. Again, maybe Ed Policy is being given some leeway is the wrong word, but some power to kind of start exercising certain things. But you would think that you would have to get Murphy's sign off. Anyways, there's that. And we know that Mark Murphy is opposed to it anyways. He's in favor of this situation. Maybe he just didn't directly submit it, but was in some ways aware of it. The only other thing I wanted to bring on is sort of the counterpoint, and several people have done it, but Mark Schlereth was on Rich Eisen's show. I don't know exactly who the host was, but it wasn't Rich Eisen. But he had posed a couple points on it that I thought were fair. He does support banning it. And he says the biggest things are inconsistencies in the NFL rule regarding player safety and fairness across offense and defense. And his whole thing is, look, if you do this on special teams where you line up behind somebody and push, it's a penalty. If you do it on defense, it's a penalty. Why are they allowed to do it on offense? I think that's entirely fair. And I would say that if you're going to allow it, that's fine. The defense should be allowed to do it too and turn it into like some kind of a rugby scrum, which is probably pretty stupid. And now we are devolving into this is not football. He said he recalls a time with the Redskins where a similar tactic was used on field goal blocks, lining up behind a 6'7" tight end, Mike Ty, to shove him through the A-gap, a play later banned by the NFL for safety reasons. So again, if that's a safety concern, then what are we doing? If it's not a safety concern, then we should bring that back. He says if pushing from behind is illegal on defense or special teams, it should be illegal for the offense too. He says what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I think that's an entirely reasonable position. Why can't I do it on defense? It's a safety concern. Why can you do it on offense? Totally fair question to ask. Now, again, I'm more so looking at it from the standpoint of then let them do it on defense, I guess. But I don't know what the freaking snowball ramifications of that are going to be. Apparently, there was also a piece done by Kyle Brandt. I don't know if it was a video or what, but it was with Neil deGrasse Tyson, the scientist, the guy who at least believes he's the smartest man in the world. I don't know if he actually is or not, but he has some interesting things that he says. But he explained the tush push is indefensible. Defenders airborne lose momentum, while offensive pushers use earth force to drive forward. Unfortunately, that's already been proven untrue, Mr. Science Man, because people have failed at it. But I understand his point. It's nearly impossible, especially when you have extra people pushing from behind. You can't use the equal force pushing into it because you're not allowed to push back with the same amount of people. And also, like you said, if you try to jump, it's going to be very difficult for that to even matter because when you go in the air, you lose all your momentum, so you're not pushing. And even if you tried to grab them, they go so low, it's not going to be very effective. So I'm not saying I'm going to change my stance, but I do think that's a question that needs to be answered. How can you ban pushing some... And again, the pushing is not even necessarily... maybe it is. It probably helps quite a bit. But the Eagles could run a QB sneak from 1 yard out and get that 95% of the time instead of 98% with somebody pushing. It's the same, essentially the same thing. But I do start to understand the idea of, like I said, with the screenplay, where it kind of devolves into stupidity, where you start talking about instead of blocking out in front, why don't you just throw a screen, let the offensive lineman run behind him and just push him when people try to tackle him, just grab him and keep pushing. Like, nope. You know what I mean? Like, it gets to be kind of stupid where we're just pushing people forward, which we do allow, by the way. Green Bay Packers report cards to the NFLPA. They send out a survey to all players. They, decide how good or bad you are or whatever. The Green Bay Packers ranked 7th, which I'm pretty sure is higher than last year. Actually, let me look right here. 2024, they were what? 10th. Yeah, C+. They were 10th. This year's 7th, so they did get better, so that's good to see. Packers finished 7th overall, with the team receiving strong scores for their food dining program, along with their dietitian, weight room, and training room, which I think is a big upgrade because, remember they fired the training staff. I don't think a lot of people were happy with them. Last year, they upgraded the players' meeting and added an underground parking facility. Although these areas are not formally captured in the report cards, it demonstrates the team's commitment to improve the players' daily experience. The most common area the players feel is in need of improvement is the locker room. While the space is sufficient, players believe it should be renovated and upgraded. When asked what the team currently does best, players praise the team culture, which is reflected in strong ratings for head coach Matt LaFleur and president and CEO Mark Murphy. That's pretty cool. And it's important because, there's a lot of talk about, the Packers culture and just people being angry or whatever. Anyways, going through this, treatment of families, they got a B. They ranked 12th. Packers are one of only 3 teams that do not offer daily daycare during home games. They do provide a family room during home games. I feel like that should be sufficient. Like you can bring your family. I mean, I don't know. I guess if you don't have somebody else there, it's just you and your kid or something. If you're a only parent, maybe, I don't know. But if I have a family room, like my wife and kids could come and be in there. Or is the mom just like, look, I don't want to deal with these freaking kids. You know what I mean? Put them over there. I'm over here. It's weird. The players rate post-game family area 8.81 out of 10, ranking them 5th out of 32 teams, so that's cool. Players feel that their team frequently organizes family events, which ranks 5th out of 32. Food and dining, they got an A-. They're 6th out of 32 teams. Packers rate the taste of their food as 8.86 out of 10, which is 8th. Freshness of the food is a 9.12, which is 7th. Players rate their dining area, they're 8th out of 32. Nutritionists and dietitians, 84% of players report they got an individualized nutrition plan, ranking 14th. Players feel the team dietitian is very accessible, ranking 12th. 89% of players feel they had enough room in their individual lockers, so that's 15th, so this is the one that people were kind of upset about. 96% of players feel the locker room size is adequate, which is 12th. It's kind of crazy. Must be a lot of 100%ers in there. 98% of Packers players feel they have enough full-time trainers. That's 2nd out of 32 teams. 100% of players feel they have enough full-time physical therapists, ranking obviously number 1 out of 32, probably a tie, but still. 94% of players feel they have enough hot tub space, which is 11th. 98% have enough cold tub space, 7th. Training staff. 88% of Packers report they received enough one-on-one treatment, which is 14th. Players feel this training staff moderately contributes to their overall success, 17th. That one's below average, which is unusual. They're 5th out of 32 for weight room equipment. More than enough space to train in the weight room, which ranks 4th. Strength coaches, this is a rough one. 85% of players report they get an individualized training plan from their strength coach staff, ranking them 29th out of 32. Players feel the strength coaches moderately contribute to their overall success, 23rd out of 32. They don't like the strength coaches at all. Team travel, let's see. Comfortable personal space, 13th out of 32. Travel schedule is efficient, 5th out of 32. Packers players feel their head coach, Matt LaFleur, is efficient with their time, 93%, but that's 18th out of 32. Players feel that Matt LaFleur is moderately receptive to the locker room on the team's needs. He ranks 23rd out of 32. Still somehow an A-. I don't know how that happens. 11th out of 32 for ownership. President and CEO Mark Murphy. Average rating for perceived willingness to invest in facilities, 9.22 out of 10 from the Packers players, which is 11th. Packers feel Mark Murphy contributes to a positive team culture, 11th. Packers players feel Murphy is extremely committed to building a competitive team, 7th. So there you go, 7th highest graded team, and that's up from 10th. So good to hear that. Biggest news of the day is pushing us a little bit closer to the answer we've kind of all been expecting and waiting. Ian Rappaport's sources, the Packers have had trade conversations centered around star cornerback Jaire Alexander, and they are open to moving him for the right price. Alexander, still 28 and a 2-time Pro Bowler, is considered to be the most decorated cornerback available. I don't think that's even close. I understand the injuries are an issue, but you look at the talent of a guy like Jaire Alexander up against anybody else, and it is stupid how not close it is. So we'll see. Andrew Brandt quote tweeted this and said, translation from the Packers, no good offers yet. So he's kind of from a former inside the the front office guy saying, I understand this language, and that's what they're saying. It will be interesting. I'm kind of curious what the Packers are hoping to get for Jaire. They probably value him pretty highly. I think, if it seems like there's more of a conflict of personalities, along with the fact that, okay, he's got a lot of injury stuff, so we're not going to be desperate to bring him back or put up with whatever issues there are. Brian Gutekunst kind of alluded to, he's not happy, so obviously we're frustrated that he can't get on the field, but, he seems to also not be super happy. So the question is going to be the valuation. I think Gutekunst is going to do what he always does, which is hold firm. He doesn't want to budge. He's going to say, no, this is what it is, or you can stick it. I hope that works out again, and we'll see if that's what ends up happening. The biggest concern is if there are no trade partners and you have to just release him. Not because we didn't get anything for him necessarily, because I don't think there's a lot of value there to begin with. Because, again, it's always you take the talent minus the compensation. You take the value of the player, which is who he is, his injuries, his age, his talent, all of that, minus this gigantic contract that you're taking to pay him. How much is left over? Value minus cost. And I don't know that there's a ton left over. The biggest concern, though, is if you don't trade him, you don't dictate where he goes. And one of the things I saw when I was combing through for notes immediately was it was the Minnesota Vikings talking about if they cut him, we absolutely need to go get him. Vikings desperately need cornerback help. The Lions certainly could use him. I'm sure the Bears wouldn't flinch. By the way, if we get to it, man, it's disheartening when you go out there and listen to these GMs. A lot of them talking about we're going to be aggressive this year. The Bears saying, I've been kind of cautious in the past. We're going to be aggressive, which I think is silly. He's dummies over there talking about, I always try to build through the draft, but I think we're going to be build through the draft? You freaking liar. This dude over here's got first-round picks. He could have traded back and had 15 picks every single year and somehow ends up with 4 because you trade them all away for garbage players, you hack, liar, loser. But anyways, we got to be aggressive, and everybody's talking about pass rush help. Everybody wants to be the Eagles. There's a lot of people available, but I think the competition is going to be stupid. It is going to be a feeding frenzy for every team to go out and get these freaking pass rushers, man. It was disheartening going through all that. But anyway, I think the Packers they're going to hold firm like they always do, and they're going to give off that impression of like, I don't need you. We'll just keep him. I don't really give a crap. He's under our contract. He's under our control, and he will stay here. And I think somebody will offer something. That's the benefit of it. Everybody would love for him to get cut, so then you can just offer him whatever you want. You can get a better contract. You don't have to give up the draft compensation. The problem is the odds of you getting him become very low. And now you're in a bidding war with all these other teams that need him, like the Vikings and the rest of the NFL, that are trying to go out and get him. So if you can just throw a little bit of something to the Packers to secure him, and the Packers get him out of the NFC North, get him out of the NFC entirely, ship him off to the AFC if you can, find a team that we're not playing this year, just we don't want to see him. At least, if it's an AFC team that we play, make it at the end of the year so the chances of him being healthy for that game are supremely diminished. But the wheels are in motion. That's my guess as to what is happening and what will happen. I think Andrew Brandt is correct. They're throwing it out there. Listen, this kind of a report from Ian Rappaport, it just screams that this is coming from the Green Bay Packers. If you read that again, Alexander, still just 28, a 2-time Pro Bowler, considered the most decorated cornerback available. Like, this is a sales pitch. This is them putting out the bulletin board, making it official. He didn't just sneakily find this out. This was put out there by the Green Bay Packers. It's a giant advertisement. Hey, give me a call. Jaire's available, right? Because some teams are going to call up. They'll be like, hey, what about Jaire, whatever, and nothing's really materializing. Let's open up the floodlines. You know what I mean? Like, let's just officially do this. And it puts Jaire on notice. Now he's fully aware of the situation. I'm sure talks have completely been dead since he left. Now there's no question. It's out there now. So the hope being you start getting more calls, you start kind of playing people off each other. If somebody's like, I'll give you a conditional 7th, and it's like, you can go stick it. That's your starting point. Let's work from there. You come in high. I want a 3rd. Like, shove it, bro. I'm not giving you a 3rd for Jaire. Just see what you can get. And I think it will materialize like it almost always does. We're going to get something. It's going to be decent value, and it's going to get Jaire off our books, off our team, and away from the NFC North. But I don't know that it's going to happen fast because that's just how Gutekunst. I mean, look at the Rodgers thing, which probably was a much more complicated situation than Jaire. I think Jaire's probably got a bigger market than Rodgers did. It's a very specific thing to have an extremely expensive old quarterback as opposed to a 28-year-old corner. Who doesn't want that? Aside from the Packers, apparently. So we'll see. I mean, it might go fast. I mean, all it takes is for anyone to call up and say, we'll do it, and it's done. But generally, that's Gutekunst's thing. He's going to hold firm, call in, be like, hey, how about a 6? And he's just going to hang up the phone, and that's it. Call me when you're serious. Click. It's worked. In my estimation, this is what Gutekunst has always done. I think he's very good at it. It scares the crap out of me every time, but it always works out. So I'm going to trust the guy to handle the situation. We will get some compensation, and I would just encourage you to not sit here. I saw the Ike Packers people on social media. They get a lot of hate, so I won't super contribute to it. But they had posted something like, if we're not getting a first or a second, we should just keep him. Bro, come on. First of all, I think keeping him is out the door at this point. Second of all, we're not getting a first or a second. And if we do, I'm just missing something in this equation entirely. / all hail Brian Gutekunst. You know what I mean? The only thing I could possibly conceive is if a team reached out to Jaire and his camp and said, we'd like to trade for you. We're going to throw this contract in the garbage, and we're going to write you a new one. And I don't know what guaranteed money is still sitting on that contract. I can't imagine a ton. And the Packers would end up picking up a good portion of that anyways. But in that case, when you look at value minus cost, you bring the cost down. You pay him something that you feel is more reasonable as opposed to his inflated contract right now. And that might bring up the value a little bit. But we'll see. We'll see. Let's let Gutekunst do what he does, and we'll see how it materializes. All right. Running long as expected. We'll take a break. We'll come back and go through the some of the combine data and information. We'll be right back. So I'm going to try to do an abbreviated version of this. I spent too much freaking time on this, and it's probably to the point that it's not even interesting to anybody. But let's start off by going through the drills, the purpose of the drills, and kind of which positions tend to care most about it. I've also got my favorite handy-dandy guide in one of these tabs here, which we'll get to. But just kind of showcasing specifically the correlation between the test and the success per position, but also the correlation of the test to draft position. In other words, how much teams really like it. And sometimes there's big discrepancies, which is pretty funny, and just kind of highlights how teams are still stupid a little bit. Anyways, 40-yard dash, most popular one in the entire combine, obviously measures straight line speed. It measures acceleration. You've also got splits, which are less talked about but are also quite important. The 10-yard and 20-yard splits. Essentially all that is when they run the 40-yard dash, they track when you cross 10 yards and when you cross 20 yards. But pure acceleration would be the 10-yard split. 40-yard dash is more long speed, so you can kind of just get more from that. Most relevant position would be wide receiver, cornerback, a little bit for running back. There's a ton of data. I went through, holy crap, how many different studies? There's a bunch of scientific studies that were done on this. We're not going to go through all those, but it's kind of interesting because they would actually break down. I usually, when I would do it or when I've seen other people do it, it was always just tied to success, period, whether that's PFF grade or AV or whatever metric you want to use. They kind of looked at the correlations between the drills and then just took all the different stats and put it out there to find the different correlations. So they'd find things like running back 40 time or something. I don't think it was 40 time. I think it was 3 cone or whatever. But running back 40 time has a high correlation to yards per attempt in the NFL or something like that. It was kind of interesting. Anyways, bench press, 225. How many times can you rep it? It's upper body strength, and even that is iffy. It's a very specific kind of a test, but it's kind of the gym rat test. It's just to kind of see who spends all their time working out in the gym. Typically, it's mostly for offensive and defensive linemen. You don't really care about the rest. Tight ends and linebackers maybe a little bit more. I mean, it's always interesting. You see a running back that can, rep the crap out of 225. It's like, oh, all right, okay. Might be kind of fun. Same with wide receiver. Anybody could be interesting. Quarterbacks, you probably care the least, unless bench somehow has something to do with arm strength. I don't know. The vertical jump is one of the explosive metrics. It measures lower body explosiveness, leaping ability. It's jumping straight up from a standstill, reaching up as high as possible. It's leg power and fast twitch fibers that generally will generate that force. I think it's generally seen as best for wide receivers and tight ends. I mean, the most lazy analysis, I guess you could say, not that any of this really matters all that much. The number one takeaway from any of these studies is that there's minor correlation, but it's mostly just stupid. Nobody cares. Even NFL teams don't seem to care. But wide receivers and tight ends, the ability to jump up, it expands your catch radius, right? That's why we like long arms for receivers and tight ends. And if you can jump, now your long arms plus your high jump, the ability for you to catch a ball goes way up because your catch radius goes up. DBs maybe a little bit. Broad jump is another explosive one. It's lower body power and balance. See how far a player can jump forward from a start. Tracks your core strength and stability as well. Ability to kind of land and stay there. It's actually highly relevant to running backs. I think this might be the one, but if you think about it, powerful legs, burst through holes, contact balance, core strength, all that kind of stuff. There seems to be a pretty high correlation comparatively. Not, none of these are massively high, but as far as these tests go, it's a decent running back test. Wide receivers and DBs are another one, potentially. 3-cone drill is maybe one of the more interesting ones. Agility, change of direction, all that kind of stuff. Tests quick acceleration, deceleration, body control, flexibility, change of direction, speed. And this is a big one for edge rushers. Defensive line as well, but edge rushers, it's all that speed bend. You know what I mean? Edge rushers that are, that kill the 3-cone under 7 seconds or whatever, get high marks. If you're looking 7.2 plus, it gets to be a little bit iffy. But that's a real big one for edge rushers. According to Steelers analyst Matt Williamson, it mimics what edge rushers do. Corner without losing speed, requiring fluidity, ankle flexion, and balance. Top edge rushers frequently run at under 6.9 to 7 seconds. Slower times, 7.2 plus, may signal limited bend flexibility. The 20-yard shuttle, also known as the short shuttle or the 5-10-5, tests short area quickness and lateral agility. They sprint 5 yards one way, 10 yards back the other way, and then 5 yards back to the starting position, touching the line at each change of direction. Tests lateral movement explosion in short bursts and ability to start-stop quickly. This one is more so an offensive lineman drill. It's big for, if you think about, you're getting low, exploding, and running. This is somewhat mimicking offensive lineman pulling. So you think about those interior linemen, a center, a guard, whatever, down in your stance, coming out, exploding, and sprinting off to the side. Somewhat relevant for linebackers, scraping down the line, change of direction, fill gaps, drop in coverage, that kind of stuff. Needs similar types of mobility. As an example, many teams prefer interior linemen to have a shuttle around or below 4.8 seconds. Slower shuttles can be red flags for agility. In fact, it's noted that almost all guards drafted high run a shuttle of under 4.8s. One recent exception being Kenyon Green. This exemplifies teams' emphasis on short area quickness and alignment. By the way, Kenyon Green was really bad. I don't even know if he's still in the NFL, but that guy was just bad at stuff. 60-yard shuttle is very much not talked about. Most people don't even do the drill. It's 5, 10, 15, 60 yards total. It's kind of the 20-yard short shuttle, but add in an endurance component. Don't know as far as who's interested in for what. Can indicate a player's ability to maintain quickness over multiple direction changes, which might translate to play-to-play situation, but it's not... says teams generally put less weight on the 60-yard shuttle compared to other drills, as evidenced by some data showing teams place much less weight, quote-unquote, on it than 3-cone broad jump for evaluation of prospects. Then you got your position-specific drills. So those are the big ones that are all televised. that everyone's waiting for. But then also you've got each position has their own stuff. So for quarterbacks, you got throwing drills. You go out and throw routes like go routes, out routes, slants, etc. Show off their arm strength, accuracy, footwork on drops, and timing. Also measured on how well the ball comes out of their hand, footwork under center versus shotgun. Wide receivers run the gauntlet, which is basically the Puka Nacua drill. Sounds like people in the media already are all in on this, and it makes a lot of sense because it's as you run in a straight line, you turn left. It's the one where you turn left to right and you catch football passes. It's kind of like a 40-yard dash, but it's game speed. You know, it's not this weird little track thing that you train for and do a thing that you would never actually perform in an NFL game. It's NFL-style run down the field and catch a football. And I mentioned Puka Nacua because I think 2 years ago or whatever, he had, I think, a slow 40. But he came out and ran 20 miles an hour through, they tracked his miles per hour, 20 miles an hour through the gauntlet, maybe at least 20 miles an hour. And then some of the other fast guys were slower. They were weaving back and forth across the line to kind of like, charge toward the ball. Their overall speed was slowed down. So you look at the comparison of game speed as opposed to this little stupid track event, the 40-yard dash, and people look at it and go, Puka Nacua killed this. He's faster than a lot of the other fast guys running through this, because he just powers through a straight line, doesn't decelerate at any point, doesn't deviate from the route, the line, and just turns and hand catches these balls seamlessly. So that's a pretty fun one, and it's interesting, and I hope that they put up the miles per hour again this year. I think that's a really cool... They need to add more of that kind of stuff to help us kind of track what they're doing. It'd be cool if they put like miles per hour on the football for the quarterbacks, or had sort of the Amazon trackers where you could kind of track the route as he goes. You can see the lines as they run through all this stuff like that would be really cool. Running backs, they got bag drills, change of direction drills, showing their vision, cutting, all that stuff. Offensive linemen have their mirror drills. You're kind of mirroring what the person in front of you is doing. Kick slide drills, pulling drills. Defensive line and edge have their pass rush drills, running around their hoops and bags. You've seen the thing where you kind of do the little swim move, you bring the arm inside and kind of swat it away and whatnot. Linebackers have their drop back drills, lateral slides, it's kind of similar to the DB drills and whatnot, but it's kind of, making sure you can move in all directions, because you got to sometimes come forward, sometimes you got to drop, you got to run laterally. They just want to check you out and make sure you can do all that. Defensive backs, they got their back pedal stuff, right? You go back and then they tell you when to flip your hips and run. It's a big one for corners, the ability to flip your hips. Tight ends basically do offensive line and wide receiver drills, because that's kind of what they are. On top of that, you got the height, weight, arm length, hand size measurements. Hand size is big for quarterbacks, obviously. Arm length for offensive linemen. Height for receivers and DBs. Medical exams, every year we hear that's the most important thing. And I think the reason being that's the one box that these guys don't have checked. A lot of this other stuff, they have the information. They kind of know how fast they are. They know how tall they are. They know a lot of this stuff. They might tweak it a little bit based on what they do. What they don't know are the medicals. They do know. They know that there are concerns. And some of these guys, they don't know. They find a heart issue or whatever. But that's the most important thing. Let's make sure they don't have some serious heart, lung issue, whatever. And also guys that have torn ACLs or whatever, check the progress. How's the leg? What's going on? So that's what they care about the most. Had guys like Miles Jack and Maurice Hurst slid because of issues. Jack with the knee injury. Maurice Hurst had a heart condition. Then they have their interviews and psychological tests. Team get 15 minutes to formally interview players and assess intangibles, football IQ, character, work ethic, how a player handles pressure, or chalkboard X's and O's. Historically, the Wonderlic test, a cognitive exam, was administered. Though the league is shifting to newer cognitive tests, good interview performance can elevate a prospect, showing good leadership or high football IQ, whereas poor interviews or red flag answers can get hurt. Coaches may quiz a quarterback on diagramming a play, question tough personnel questions to judge maturity. And then flipping back the other way, kind of looking position by position, what matters the most. For quarterbacks, it's the throwing drills, the hand size measurement, and if you're a mobile quarterback, then you might care about 40-yard dash and three-cone. If you're more of a passer, it's really just the throwing drills and then hand size measurements. For running backs, 10-yard split, 40-yard dash. This one always surprised me that the 40-yard dash, because everyone, 40-yard dash is stupid. Running backs and 40-yard dash, it tends to to some degree, correlate. Again, nothing is very strong as far as correlation, but any correlation is somewhat interesting. After that would be the vert or broad jump, which is the explosion, which we talked about, followed by shuttle and 3-cone, then bench press, and then probably size measurements after that. Wide receiver, 40-yard dash, then vert, then broad, then 3-cone and 20-yard dash, then the position drills, down from there, 40-yard dash for tight ends, vert, broad, 3-cone, bench press, and then positional drills. O-line, it does say 40. It says surprisingly relevant for offensive tackles, not for the full 40 yards in games, but as a proxy for athleticism. Offensive tackles often need to run in space, lead block, etc., etc. Teams have noticed successful tackles usually run 5.3 seconds or faster, with around 5.4 being a rough cutoff for first-round caliber offensive tackles. 20-yard shuttle is seen as very important. 3-cone drill, useful for tackles change of direction. And then it says, surprisingly, combine data has shown bench press for offensive tackles has negative correlation with playing time, possibly because extremely bulky weight room strong tackles might lack agility. Interior offensive line, 3-cone and 20 shuffle, often more important, or shuttle, not shuffle, more important than the 40. It says bench press matters more than for offensive tackles. The interior guys face powerful defensive tackles. Upper body strength helps trench warfare, which makes a lot of sense. Higher reps, 25 to 30, indicate the strength to anchor and drive block. 40-yard dash, not super important. Edge rushers, obviously, as we said, 3-cone drill, perhaps the most important for edge is the 3-cone. Simulates tight cornering. 40-yard dash, 10-yard split. Critical, measures initial explosion off the line. Key for beating offensive tackles. Vert and broad, obviously explosion, very similar. That explosion off the line matters. Bench to assess strength. And then the position drills. Defensive tackles, 10-yard split is vital. Like with edges and interior alignments, quickness off the ball, first step is key to shooting gaps, especially for the Packers. If you think about what Hafley is ideally looking for, guys that can shoot gaps, look for that explosion. Look for the 10-yard split, the vert, the broad, that kind of stuff to explode through. Bench press is often the marquee for the defensive tackles, frequently top the bench press charts. Upper body strength is crucial to hold the line and shed blocks. 3-cone and shuttle for linebackers, very important for change of direction. Vert and broad, similarly. Explosion matters, hitting, tackling, burst. It also matters what kind of a linebacker you are. Coverage linebacker versus your thumper linebacker. Coverage guys will shine more so in the agility drills, the 40-yard dash. The run stoppers might have more average speed, but excel in the strength and explosion numbers. Kind of depends on what you're looking for and what you want your guy to excel at. DBs, again, 40-yard dash, critical for cornerbacks. Long speed, determine if a cornerback can go stride for stride down the field. A lot of teams do have benchmarks for corners, which I think is an important thing for the combine as well. Some of the time, I tend to think it has less to do with the guys on the high end as opposed to the guys on the low end. If you run a 4.4 compared to a 4.2, that's cool and it's nice. The question is, what happens if you run a 4.7? That's what I care about. Like if you have issues with speed, now we need to look and say, okay, how much of an issue? 4.55 we can work with. 4.7, I don't think we're going to draft you. I made up that number, but I'm just saying, I think that's kind of the issue. Vert, again, can you go up and work toward the ball, get the ball, knock it away, etc., etc. Obviously, position drills. Now, having said all of that, and I've kind of alluded to this already, but overall, the correlation between these drills and how good of a football player, and we know this, we've been doing this long enough. We love the guys that run 4.24 or 4.24 or something, and that it's fun for the combine. And then once the season starts, nobody cares. They don't usually do very much. Who's that Ross guy, right? I think previously held the record for 40 or something. He was terrible. In general, most combine drills have little to no strong correlation with long-term NFL success. Kuzmits and Adams in 2008 looked at 6 years of data for quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers and found no consistent statistical relationship between combine tests and professional football performance, with the notable exception of the 40-yard dash for running backs. Essentially, faster running backs tend to perform better. That was what I mentioned before. We're really surprised by that, but it's interesting. But for quarterbacks and wide receiver, combine drills didn't reliably predict who became a star. Now, I don't know exactly. That's one of the things that's interesting with these studies that I was looking at. They're all looking at different things and asking different questions. One of them I was pouring through, assuming they were talking about the success in the NFL, and really what they were talking about was draft position. So it had more to do with what teams value than what the success is. And there's a question of success, right? What is success? Are we talking longevity in the NFL? Are we talking about value? What does that mean? You know, what methods are you? It's kind of tough to say, and that's why there's different studies saying slightly different things. But again, running backs 40 time, wide receiver combine metrics generally have weak direct correlations. There are some positive ones, but very weakly positive, like the vert and the broad jump. For quarterbacks, a recent study by Bruin Sports Analytics 2021 confirmed combine drills have weak to no correlation with quarterback career performance. For offensive linemen, the combine can reveal athletic outliers who tend to succeed. For example, tackles with faster 40s and shuttles have done well, but data has also shown curious results like bench press being negatively correlated with offensive tackle success, as well as strongly positive correlation for interior offensive linemen. Agility drills for offensive linemen do correlate with better performance. If nothing else, they correlate with being drafted higher, which in turn often means higher success odds. Then we've gone over a couple of these, but some critical thresholds and benchmarks. So for the 40-yard dash, wide receivers, 4.5 is kind of the number. It's not an official cutoff, but if you're on either side of that, it's either, okay, that's good, or that's not great. Cornerbacks, similarly, 4.5. If you see guys that are beyond 4.55, you're going to start hearing things about maybe they're a zone corner or a safety or whatever. Running backs, probably around 4.6. Linebackers, 4.7. Tight ends, 4.7. Tackles, 5.3. Defensive line, edge rushers, about 4.8. It varies because you got guys that can run 4.4s off the edge, but there's also kind of that question of not looking at the high end, but the low end. There's some guys it doesn't really, we're not drafting you because you're an elite athlete freak, but we do need to know that you have the requisite speed. So 4.8 is probably a little more along that line. Defensive tackles, ideally sub 5.1. 5.1 to 5.3 is kind of your average, so if you can beat the 5.1, that's pretty solid. Quarterbacks, again, no fixed cutoff. Some probably terribly slow quarterbacks, but 4.8 is kind of the number you're looking at. Mentioned 3-cone for edge rushers. You're trying to break 7. 20-yard shuttle for DBs and wide receivers, often around 4 to 4.2 seconds. For the vert, a 40-inch vertical is elite for any position. Very few hit that. 35 plus for wide receiver DB, 30 for running back linebacker, 28 for tight end, 25 for linemen. A good broad jump is 10 feet, which is 120 inches. So for any of the skill guys that hit 10 feet, that's solid. Elite would be over 11 feet. Good explosion for a lineman is probably 9 feet. And then bench press, if you're an offensive lineman, probably defense too. 25 plus would be the expectation. If you can't get to 20, some questions there. So just again, kind of a combine primer. If you have any questions, feel free to call in, get some clarification on that. But those are the drills and kind of just some things to keep an eye on. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and I'll rip through some of the notes that I found over the last couple of days. We will be right back. So what I think I'll do, we're going to skip the second Brian Gutekunst presser because we have too much to go through. And I do want to, I was going to just do bullet points, and I thought, no, you know what, we can save that for maybe tomorrow. We'll see exactly how that goes. But I want to get through some of the notes that I went through here. This is going to be NFL draft focused / free agency and whatnot. Again, a lot of GMs going to the podium, and I want to try to rip through as much of this as we can. So to be clear, this is going to be very NFL-centric. If you don't care about that, if you don't care about the NFL draft type stuff or whatever, doing your mock drafts, then I'll catch you tomorrow. I'm not even sure where to begin. There is so much here. I have a bunch of notes. So we're going to go team by team. I have this organized by the draft. I don't have every single team, but I want to rip through all the notes that I was able to find as far as the rumors and whatnot, starting with the Tennessee Titans. The GM for the Titans, Mike Bergonzi, has received several phone calls. Brian Callahan has made comments about their focuses on improving the trenches, specifically pass protection and pass rush. However, there was a ton of talk about how Jaire Sanders really does fit Callahan's vision, system, whatever you want to call it. So you got trade, you've got trenches, which would probably be Abdul Carter, and you've got Jaire Sanders sitting there on top of the fact that everybody views Cam Ward as the top quarterback, and it's probably going to be him. So what did we learn? I don't know. They did ask about Hunter, and he is viewed by the Titans as primarily a corner. That seems kind of like a no-brainer, but as we move on, you'll find out that isn't unanimous. Additionally, for the Titans, there is some rumors that they may be looking to trade pass rusher Harold Landry, 29 years old. He's got 2 years left on his deal, looking to be traded. He tore his ACL, missed 2022, but strong rebound season after that. Titans only have 2 top 100 picks. Part of the issue is, as far as the trade, they want to add inside of their top 100. This could be another opportunity, possibly. I think it's a stretch to think you'd get this for Landry, but maybe it depends on the contract. They want to stack up as many top 100 picks as they possibly can because they know they have a lot of needs. Right? That was the thing where it's like, we need trenches, but also, I'm not an idiot. Our team sucks. We have a lot of needs, and we need to not be overly picky. We need a lot of picks. And it's noted that teams like Lions, Commanders, Bills, and Packers could covet the pass rush skills of a guy like Harold Landry. There is no guaranteed money in his $24 million per year deal. The Browns at pick 2, GM Andrew Berry sees Hunter as a wide receiver first, valuing his ball skills and versatility. He also completely shut down any Myles Garrett trade talk, calling it irrelevant. They continue to maintain that they will not trade Myles Garrett despite his reported dissatisfaction. They said trading Myles Garrett before June 6 would be financially disadvantageous. The Browns believe that Garrett's going to remain productive for several more years, and they've said that no team has made a compelling enough offer for Garrett, or I shouldn't say enough. Nobody's made a compelling offer for Garrett. Most people believe this is posturing. This is just a tactic you use to there's no price to see how deep in their pockets people will dig to see if they can get you to change your mind. But the Browns have been unflinching in this. The Giants at 3. Joe Schoen mentioned stressed the quarterbacks attacking via draft and free agency. They only have Tommy DeVito on the roster right now. He deflected when talking about Stafford, but did hint at being aggressive. So, what does that mean exactly? You have to assume, somebody had mentioned, I don't have it in my notes, but I don't watch the NBA. I think it's the NBA, that free agency comes after the draft. And I thought, I don't know if I would like that. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, no, that does make sense. The draft is meant to be, it's maybe you can call it additional strategy or whatever you want to call it, but the draft is meant to be just getting the best players. And free agency is meant to patch the holes, but you don't know what your holes are until the draft, and so you have to try to anticipate, and then you get to the draft and things fall a certain way, and you're like, well, damn it. So, I mean, it's probably not even a worthwhile conversation, but in case the conversation does come up, put me down for, I think I would rather have the draft and then free agency. I don't know that would ever really happen, because the only 2 ways that I could see that happening would be, 1, to move the draft super early, which they don't want to do. They want to have the NFL as much of a year-round thing as they can. They like the timing of it, and they don't want to kind of condense the end of the season and elongate the amount of time that there's nothing going on. Other than that, the only thing you can do is to move the official start to the league year after the draft, and I don't know about that either. I'm sure there's a ton of complications that would come, but I'm just saying. Because they don't know what's going to happen in the draft, I have to assume they're going to be somewhat aggressive in free agency. Matthew Stafford has been talked about quite a bit. We'll get more on that as there's another big player in town on Stafford. The Patriots at 4. Coach Mike Vrabel wants a receiver to support quarterback Drake May. Obviously, the mind goes to Teteroa McMillan as a potential pick at 4. It feels high, But when the coach comes out and says, we need a wide receiver for Drake May, listen. Jaguars at 5, GM James Gladstone and Coach Liam Cohen prioritize interior offensive line to aid their quarterback, potentially targeting offensive tackle Will Campbell at 5. The Raiders at 6, GM John Spike aims to emulate the Eagles' formula, strong defense, run game focus. Running back Ashton Jeanty could be in play at 6, starting his draft range, despite a deep running back class due to his elite talent and the Raiders' poor rushing grade last season. In addition, there's a lot of conversation about Matthew Stafford. Colin Cowherd had Albert Breer on his show. He highlighted the Raiders' assets. They have Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, Max Crosby, maybe, solid left tackle and center, as well as Brock Bowers. They have tax advantages with no state tax versus California's 13.5%, and suggested a 4-year deal could outbid the Rams' 2-year offer by $60 to $70 million in total. Albert Breer says Stafford fits Tom Brady's vision to boost the Raiders' credibility, with Carroll Spytek and financial backers like Tom Wagner, making them competitive faster and being able to attract free agents. So no real way to know, but based on, it's funny how Tom Brady seems to be running things, Tom Brady's vision of we need to up our profile, we need to start seeming like a more legitimate team, and the best way to do that is to get a legitimate quarterback. You get a legitimate quarterback in here, then you can get free agents. Doesn't matter if he's out of here in a year or two. We need to start this fire. Panthers at 8, likely to focus on defense, specifically edge, but McMillan could tempt them offensively. Bears at 10, Ryan Poles plans to spend on interior offensive line in free agency and stresses running the ball with left tackle Braxton Jones facing competition. Ben Johnson's quote-unquote juice is noted. Defensive line strategy addressing the spot opposite Montez Sweat involves balancing free agency and the draft. They are open to adding pass rushers in both phases, citing the Super Bowl as proof you can't have too many. Again, everybody is talking about the Super Bowl, and guess what? We want to go bolster our defensive line. It's a copycat league. They're targeting a physical team, starts with the trenches, emphasizing finishing plays dominantly and depth. Bears GM Ryan Poles plans to spend big on the offensive line in free agency, possibly opening the door for a non-offensive line pick at pick 10. So everybody's saying it's going to be a tackle, going to be a tackle, going to be a tackle, but if they go out and hammer offensive line in free agency, if there's even anybody available, they may go in a different direction. Edge rusher, Ashton Jeanty, if he's even available, some options. Ryan Poles says he plans to be more aggressive at the top of the market with a clearer vision, targeting players who fit key checkboxes, unlike past caution focused on draft building, you lying jagoff. Whatever. Bottom line is, he's saying at the top of the market, in other words, the more expensive guys, probably going to be looking at them. Dolphins at 13. Coach Mike McDaniel is planning as if left tackle Teron Armstead won't return, signaling a likely offensive line pick. Top target is offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. As for the Falcons, GM Terry Fontenot and Coach Raheem Morris emphasized a defensive-heavy draft using all 45 combine interviews on defensive players. They are certainly tipping their hand on that. Reports suggest no offensive assistants are even at the combine, hinting at a focus on fixing their defensive line and secondary. How absolutely insane is that? It's like the Bears not even talking to other quarterbacks. This might even be worse. Every one of your interviews is a defensive player. You brought your defensive coaches to the combine and left the offensive ones at home. Come on, boys. As for the Broncos at pick 20, Coach Sean Payton is prioritizing a joker position, which is a versatile offensive player. Tight end, running back, likely a first-round target. Potential fits Ashton Jeanty, Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren. Steelers at pick 21. Apparently, Omar Khan wants either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, but not both. Going to leave the agents to decide. Also, TJ Watt isn't trade bait. George Pickens is staying, and Stafford rumors are fake news. So it'll be interesting to see who wins that quarterback competition and then what happens to the guy that leaves. Chargers, a bunch of kind of generic notes here, looking for players with good football IQ, culture, all that stuff. Harbaugh wants to find football guys. Only real interesting thing here is the note that Khalil Mack is not retiring, and they're hopeful for an extension. Joey Bosa's future is less certain, hinting at a pay cut for him, and that Zion Johnson may shift to center. Interesting to see how that pans out for the Chargers with their pass rushers. As for the Minnesota Vikings, Ryan Grigson did an interview. He's the Senior Vice President of Player Personnel, former General Manager of the Indianapolis Colts. He says the draft is deep at running back and interior offensive and defensive line positions. So running back, guard, center, defensive tackle. Believes the best interior defensive linemen will still be taken early because they're in high demand. Running backs can be found on day 3, rounds 4 through 7. He says you can get really good backs on day 3. He notes that the NFL is trending back toward valuing elite running backs. Guys like Saquon, who are dynamic, can really change a game. He says the best teams have really good offensive lines and they've invested in it. Hint, hint. He says he prefers the Senior Bowl over the Combine for evaluations. You can see them in uppers and lowers playing real football. Makes sense. Also talked about, similar to what Brian Gutekunst said, there's a big challenge in evaluating players with all the transfer stuff going on. Also said that guys are older now with all the NIL stuff. Moving off of that interview, some other notes that came up through various sources, head coach, GM, whatever. Improving the offensive and defensive line is critical for January football. So again, another team that's identifying trenches. Hopefully, I'm hoping that they're going to focus on offensive line. That's a big one for the Vikings. They're constantly being mocked, a ton of things, corner, pretty much everything. But offensive line, I think, is something to definitely keep an eye on. Kind of similar to edge. There's a bunch of offensive linemen. They could very easily all be off the board, or some of them could start to slide. I'm talking about the ones that are, between 10 and 20-ish. Early evaluations suggest a deep, versatile offensive line draft class. Tackles playing all 5 spots, guards shifting to center, things like that, offering flexibility for scheme fit, good for the Packers. They're seeking smart, tough, football-loving players to match the Vikings' evolving offensive style. With limited picks, the focus is on maximizing impact. The process is just beginning amid free agency planning. That would also point to not just players that they really like, obviously, but positions of high value. Right? If you have limited picks and you want maximal impact, you're probably not focusing on running backs and tight ends and linebackers. Not to say that they won't, but just saying. Tackle, for example, would make sense. You could slide inside. I'm just saying. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. Not trying to step on any Vikings fans' toes here or anything. Also, probably the biggest conversation right now when I look at all the Vikings YouTube channels and everything else is quarterback, which is weird because it doesn't seem that complex, but apparently it is, and there's a lot of big questions that are going on right now. Things that I assumed were kind of a foregone conclusion apparently are not. So, again, Colin Cowherd and Albert Breer were having a conversation about this. Cowherd is saying they need to just franchise tag him and presumably trade him. I don't know. Breer says the high tag cost complicates things. More than likely, he's going to test the market, and the Vikings are going to assess his value. So they're going to go through that whole process of potentially keeping him if it's at the right price. There's further complications with J.J. McCarthy because of his 2 knee surgeries. He had a surgery and then he had a cleanup. It raises doubts about his readiness for OTAs, prompting a veteran backup plan. Could be Darnold at $25 to $30 million or Daniel Jones for a cheaper option. So the problem is they're not super confident that J.J. McCarthy is going to be ready, so we need somebody else, and who is it going to be? It's not a great draft, obviously, and you wouldn't really want to draft somebody because you're just really looking for somebody to fill in, and it's probably going to be hard to find a better option than Daniel Jones or than Sam Darnold, even though that ended in disaster. Vikings said that discussions are ongoing about re-signing Darnold. Franchise tag or extension are all options that remain open. So we will see how that materializes, and there's a lot of chips that still need to fall in that regard. The Texans at 25, D'Amico Ryans has flat out said he's targeting offensive line and wide receiver. Talks with Stephon Diggs are ongoing. Tank Dell's return is uncertain. This is for draft and free agency. along with defensive tackle. So O-line, wide receiver, and D tackle for the Texans. Again, defensive line, it's everybody wants it. Whether it's edge, interior, whatever, everybody wants it. As for the Ravens, Eric DeCosta did address the Justin Tucker situation. He kind of hinted that it's unlikely that he will be back with the team. They're also optimistic on re-signing Ronnie Stanley and targeting guards and edge in the draft. Again, edge rusher, everybody wants it. The only potential good news here might be the Lions. It was kind of interesting because essentially they conceded, we have no money. We're going to be using our money to re-sign guys like Aiden Hutchinson, and so we will not be making a big splash, for example, at edge in free agency. It's just really not an option. So that was good to hear. There's a lot of concern about that. Does not seem to be the case. Holmes admitted there's no room for big pass rush splash, e.g. Garrett, with Aiden Hutchinson's looming payday, per Kevin Patra's reporting. Limited big spending expected due to focus on retaining young core players, preference for keeping known talent over overspending on external unknowns. Past signings are noted, but no massive splashes are anticipated. Tough decisions loom due to having many high-value players from recent drafts. Financial planning is ongoing. This is one of the things that I've been talking about for several years, and it doesn't mean they're going to be bad. It's just a question of it's a lot easier when you start. It gets harder as you become a really good team for a long time. Now it's about retention and also attrition, right? Can you maintain a high-level team with people constantly leaving, people getting hurt, people getting old, people getting too expensive? Now we got a bunch of people that all of a sudden need to start paying. Now what do? There is a desire, though, for multiple high-end edge rushers, though acquiring them is a challenge due to scarcity and cost. What does that mean? Watch for the draft. Pass rush is a universal need across the league and won't be ignored. So there are a decent amount of edge rusher options, but I'll be surprised if I can find a single team that is not interested right now. There just are not many that isn't a need/priority. As far as the draft, team building philosophy, best player available, not just based on positional needs, emphasizes strengthening the trenches, offensive and defensive line, as a core strategy. Obviously, this has always been their strategy. Depth is critical, especially after experiencing significant injuries. Last year's draft addressed a need at youth at cornerback, which aligned with available talent. This year's draft is seen as deep, particularly for interior and edge defense linemen. Chiefs at 31, focusing on improving the offensive line, particularly the left side. They are planning to re-sign Trey Smith. That's big because if you've been paying attention to the Bears at all, everything they've been talking about is who are we going to get. And at the top of the list is always Trey Smith. Every one of them wants and assumes they're getting Trey Smith all the time. This is what Bears fans constantly do. They look at the free agent lists of people that are going to be free agents if they don't get re-signed, and they say, we're definitely getting that guy, we're getting that guy, we're getting that guy. That was the same with Elton Jenkins. We're getting Elton Jenkins. And I would comment, and I'm like, we're not letting Jenkins go. I don't know why you're thinking, with what money? What money? Oh, you guys are so stupid. And again, you'd have Packer fans chime in too, like, I don't know, dude, we don't have any money. We're going to have to cut everybody. Like, okay, Rashawn and Jaire, and they're all gone. Okay, well, guess what? We paid them all, so shut up. It's not a guarantee, but they did say that they're making it a high priority to sign him, as well as linebacker Nick Bolton. They did talk about, similarly to, I forget who it was, but the franchise tag costs are very high, which can be prohibitive, but they do anticipate bringing these guys back. And the Chiefs are operating under the assumption that Travis Kelce will return, and the news of there being a timeline for Kelce, they dismissed and said there is no timeline for Travis Kelce, which would make sense because, like I said, it's kind of shocking to see them put a timeline on a superstar like that. Another kind of similar note, or same note, but deeper context or whatever. Chiefs GM Brett Veach expects Kelce back for 2025. Per Podium and NFL Network comments, costing $17 million in cap space, but justified by his value. So that fairy tale of losing that guy, unfortunately, doesn't seem to be the case. Eagles Take a wild guess. Roseman fixated on O-line, D-line additions. He dodges Myles Garrett rumors and sees a risky offseason with young talent locked in. Oh, and one more thing. Rob Gronkowski, 36 in May, is training for a 2025 return, possibly with Sean Payton's Broncos, after bonding on Fox, per report, Matt Lammy. Report by Matt Lammy, whoever that is. I'm fine with it. It's off in the AFC. It's in the distance. I don't really have to worry about it, but I can sit back and kind of enjoy the juicy man drama. You know what I mean? It's a fun story. Who gives a crap? It's fun. Just do it. He's going to suck, but it'd be funny. Who doesn't want a little bit of Gronk in the NFL? I don't particularly enjoy him on TV, the little bit that I get to see him, so might as well put him back on the football field. You know what I mean? I think it's fun. I've got a ton of prospect stuff. These guys all sat down, as I said, with different media outlets, so you get some details, little things about who do you model your game after, what team did you grow up cheering for. Obviously, we don't have time for that today, but the Combine does start on Thursday, which should be the day that most of you are listening to this, so we'll start to get some results and things of that nature starting tomorrow, so that shall probably be the plan. Take a look at that, and time permitting, we got the Goot presser, we got the prospect details and whatnot, and those things are coming out every 5 minutes. There's another interview with a different player, so I got to go back and update my notes again. But I am going to leave it at that. I am kind of iffy on the calls here. We got almost enough for a full episode. I might give it one more day, and then with that built up, we'll hammer it again. So for those listening, tonight, expect a Packernet After Dark. All right? We're back, baby. We're so back. Hope you all have a fantastic day. I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye-bye.